Welcome, everyone, to Asian Pacific Voices Radio, where you'll find stimulating conversations that explore diverse topics and stories impacting our Asian Pacific American communities. I'm your host, Arnold Chun. Today, we have the honor of speaking with a distinguished historian and educator with a rich and unique heritage. And as the grandson of Dosan Ahn Chang Ho, a prominent leader in the Korean independence movement, my guest has dedicated much of his time to preserving and promoting his grandfather's legacy. Not only is he a passionate historian, but he also brings a fascinating blend of experiences from his multicultural upbringing, his ongoing educational endeavors, and his love for surfing. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Ahn Cuddy on Asian Pacific Voices Radio.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity. It's
Such a pleasure to have you.
I just got back from Korea, so there's a lot of things to talk about, but you got the questions, and hopefully I've got the good answers.
Well, let's see. There's so much, like you said, there's so much to talk about. I guess we should start just from, the beginning as much as we can. And we'd love for you to share some of your earliest memories growing up in particular, I mean, we know that you have such a multicultural background and diverse background, being half Korean and half American. So just some of the earliest memories that you could remember to share with us.
Well, the actual memories as a kid, I grew up in Falls Church, Virginia, back east for the first 5 years of my life. And, I remember just, living, and we had an African American woman as a nanny, and I just thought she was a regular person. But, when looking back, the reason that we had her is because no white people would babysit my sister or I. My dad's blonde haired, blue eyes, Irish. My mom's, full Korean American, born here. And some of the people in the neighborhood were from Europe because it was associated with the National Security Agency. And a really odd thing was when my sister's 5 years older, and so sometimes we go for a walk around the neighborhood with the nanny, and I think his name is Norman Lincoln Rockwell, something like that, but he was the founder of the American Nazi Party. He lived a couple blocks away, so there was a Nazi flag flying, and I didn't know what it was, but I clearly remember it. So looking back at that point, until I moved out here, that's when like white people started noticing me because I was at school in the neighborhood and got into a lot of fights. And where I live now in Northridge, there was no people of color at all. And living with my grandmother for a few years, my halmoni, and most of the I guess ethnic influences on the Korean side, but we could talk for an hour on this one, but it's interesting because basically I was different, and everybody in the family was doing things, so there was big things like for the government and working, so there was no kind of idle time. So it was always kind of a progressive movement of growing up and just dealing with things as they came.
Your background, I mean, there's such a historical heritage to you as an individual from your grandfather's legacy and all that. Is there a particular point, do you think, as you were growing up, where you started to recognize that identity, that cultural, historical heritage of your family's history? And when it did, how did that, I guess, propel you and influence you in terms of what you wanted to pursue?
Um, it happened in phases because, at first my grandmother wouldn't speak to my mom for 5 years because she married my dad, and interracial marriages were against the law. So it was kind of a two-edged sword, kind of a thing, which way things were going. So moving out here, it was more Korean. I lived with my grandmother. They were the center of the community. People were always over. We were going to picnics at the Korean National Association group and then to the building on Jefferson. So, I would see these people talking about my grandfather. His picture was on the wall. So I knew, again, it was something different, but I didn't know to the extent until basically, when I went to Korea for the first time in 1973 for the opening of Dosan Park, and I had long hair, I was surfing a lot, I played rugby, I played football. I was really totally American, but had a Korean appetite, thank God. So um, when I met Park Chung-hee, it was a big thing, because I had long hair. They tried to arrest me before and they couldn't. And so, I really noticed the cultural difference. I had no idea what to expect in Korea. And so that was kind of a shock. And so, as time went by, about 1982, the Korean government came looking for artifacts and archives to open up the Independence Hall, which is in Chonan, Korea. And they were surprised when they came here at what a big collection that we had. And I'd grown up with this stuff at my grandmother's house, seeing photos of March 1st. I mean, she showed me these photos of what the Japanese did to, her people, the Koreans, my people. And so, along the way, things impacted me. But when the starting to actually put the collection together, it's about 4 or 5 thousand items now. And I think it's a potari. It's that bundle that you see uh, women in the old days carrying their goods, and that's what she had it stored in, a lot of it, and then some in boxes. So seeing that really changed my understanding of how important my grandfather and grandmother and the entire Korean pioneer community, what their sacrifices meant to Korea. Without them, the Korea wouldn't exist. Koreans would be Japanese. So that really impacted me. And so then I started working more, and now I'm just totally entrenched with stuff that's going on today there.
Mm. Yeah. I want to circle back about your mother that you mentioned. I mean, because obviously she has a very significant background as well. I mean, being the Navy's first Asian American female officer and the first Korean born American female member and the first woman gunnery officer in all the armed
Yeah.
forces in charge of the Navy combat planes and guns and ammunition after she enlisted in 1942. Were there particular challenges that you remember or unique experiences that she shared with you, if any, which she faced navigating both the Korean and American cultures, in her time in pursuing that.
Her, from a young child, her whole life was uh, conflict with tradition of Korean culture, except my Halmani and Hadabaji were progressives. They wanted those changes. They wanted, individuality. They wanted, civic minded responsibility, things that you were thinking outside of the box. So, my mom played baseball, and my grandmother made all the kids play sports because it was a way to fight racism. So she was head of baseball at LA City College. And um, so there's a lot of things that she was going against the grain, but, Hadba just said, if that's what you want to do your best. And they all did. So the other big thing that happened is my Hadabaji left in 1926, and the family never saw him again. And then he died in prison in 1938. So there's all that impact on how they grew up. But the Korean community for the independence movement had to go on. So I think she learned that um, she always told me life's not fair. And I said, what are you talking about? But, it's not, and I learned that as an older person. And so she just was persistent. Like if I describe her in one word, was persistent, because when she enlisted, she was a college graduate. She had all the credentials to go to officer training school, but they wouldn't let her go. And so
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of things that went on with racism for her. But she says, I don't care. I'll just join as a normal um, enlisted person in the Waves. And the Waves had just started. So she's in that first group, very first group of women, um, and the only Asian, only woman of color, pretty much. And so, she was intelligent and she was educated. So when she went to these, I think, training camps in Idaho with other Cedar Falls, is that? I think that's in Cedar Falls is where she started, And, a lot of those women were Ivy League women, upper class, educated, so she was kind of a oddball, but, she was much more capable than the rest of these women. So she went to combat flight training. A link trainer was her first job. From there, she went to gunnery school where she taught people how to shoot guns and air combat strategy. And then she went to naval intelligence. And then the war ended, and she went to the National Security Agency working on the Soviet thing. So when I was
Wow.
talking to her, NBC was coming for an interview, and so I found these pictures of Waves shooting machine guns on YouTube. And so the day before I showed it to her, and this is when she was 98. And so I go, Mom, check this out. Does this bring back any remembrance? She goes, I didn't do that. I'm going, oh no. She goes, I was the only woman. There was no other women around. And so we kind of laughed, and I looked at her and I said, thank God you did well, because she did really well. Because if she would have failed, I think the white people would have blamed it on her being Asian. So, but
Well, we
there were
gotta,
so
yeah.
many stories to tell. But I got pictures of her with machine guns. She was good at shooting skeet with a shotgun, and I mean, so she was athletic, and also all this played over into her being a pretty amazing woman in the Navy.
There might be something to accuracy when it comes to Koreans' eyes because, the 10-meter pistol just in Paris, our Korean sister won that thing as a silver medalist. And, your archery has always been dominated by all the Koreans in terms of gold medals. So it's got to be something there. I mean, that's
Yeah,
such
it's
a, yeah,
the DNA. I think because when my grandfather was here, he wasn't here very much, and some of the other people, they taught him Korean history. So, they knew that they were riding horses and the archers, and so that was one thing that the Korean pioneers did. They knew they had to adapt to American culture, but they tried to keep some of the Korean culture alive.
yeah. So, what kind of impact was there? I mean, you've seen your mother's struggles and the challenges and the obstacles in which she's overcome. How did that impact you? And also then leading into like how you first became involved with wanting to promote the legacy of your grandfather, your mother, Dosan Ahn Chang Ho, and all that. Like, share a little bit with us about that.
Well, part of it is fighting. Because I literally, you know, probably got in a fist fight 2 or 3 times a week because of the racist thing. And so, luckily I won a lot of them. At first I lost, but it wasn't going away, and there was no like therapy group or community group that was concentrating on, how you relate socially. All the groups were anti-Japanese. They were trying to save their country, and they had still this mindset because of what happened after 1945. So, everybody around me was, pushing forward, living the American life, doing so. I grew up just, knowing that this was part of my identity. The Irish side wasn't obvious, but the Irish side is strong. My dad and aunt, my aunt was J. Edgar Hoover's secretary for in the FBI for 30 years. So the other thing too is that, we had the moon gate. Everything was in constant motion, and you really didn't have time to be a victim. Today I think a lot of people are victimized and victimized by Korean organizations too. And so and I was lucky because, I wasn't huge big, but physically big, I could take it. And then I was always involved. And I went to a military academy. I went to a Catholic military academy. My mom put me in there. I hated it, but I thank her for sending me there because that kind of insulated me because when I was home, it was a different deal. But when you were a cadet in that thing, you were all the same no matter what. And, Catholic religion is what it is. But, the nuns really helped with the racist stuff because there was Hispanic kids, African American kids, a couple other Asians, and so it took me out of the mainstream world, and so I could deal with things with two fronts.
Hmm. For a lot of our audience members, they may not be familiar with Dosan Ahn Chang Ho. He was a pivotal figure in Korea's fight for independence. He's known for his commitment to education, social reform, national self-reliance. Is there or was there a project that you initiated or have been involved with to honor and continue that legacy and that work and that history?
Yeah, basically, he is the figure of the independence movement, and that's one of my missions, to make sure that that changes. All of the heroes that they have there pretty much worked with or under or were heavily influenced by Tosan Ahn Chang Ho. And, part of that, as I got older, realizing, looking at all these documents that we have, working with the Independence Hall, I worked there for 2 years. And it's my family's history. I don't have a PhD in Korean history. My degrees are in anthropology and geography, but I have a PhD in my family history, which is Korean American history, basically. We're the first Korean American family. So his whole philosophy is based on the truth. And, kind of like what I've learned from him, too, in some senses, is history isn't history unless it's a truth. And so that's what I fight for. A lot of people don't understand how much I've been exposed to just by being in this family. And, everybody, like my Uncle Philip, star on Hollywood Boulevard. Uncle Philson was a top engineer at Hughes. Uncle Ralph was a great athlete. And my aunt, was a businesswoman. And there's all these uh, elements of the family. My grandmother, my hominy, she was amazing. So, the importance of what happened, it's like fate chooses our relatives and we choose our friends. I mean, I was born into this. So, but I took it seriously because it is important. And, like right now, I'm fighting with the president of Korea over the Syngman Rhee Hall thing. Um, I'm fighting with UC Riverside, and this Riverside is the first Koreatown. It's all a hoax. And also, the Independence Hall just appointed a pro-Japanese president. And so, while I was there, I didn't know it, and found out about it, and got into the media with that. So I take it seriously, but I was also there to work on surfing and food, so it was quite a balanced out trip. But I can't emphasize how important, not because he's my grandfather, but historically, that An Chang Ho was and is still today. So, I've got a mission, and it's gotten better. It's gotten better, but here in the Korean American community, well, they don't teach Korean American history. Yeah, USC, the Korean Studies Center is in my mom's old house. It's the campus that's located next to the biggest community of Korean Americans outside of Korea, and they don't teach Korean American history. That's just and I know I got in a fight with Larry Bacow, who is the president of Harvard University, over him being pro-Japanese with the Ramsayer deal when they said that the comfort women thing was a hoax.
Hmm.
So there's things that need to be done, but Korean history, I mean, is beautiful and sad and violent and peaceful, and it's 5,000 years of history. So there's a lot to learn about it. But the modern Korean history, the one thing I is Tosan is more important than people think.
And that's a great point. And I know that our audience, for those that want to learn more, obviously because there's just not enough literature sometimes, or websites, or films, or documentaries, are there uh, pieces that you can point us to, documentaries or films or websites that the audience who wants to know more can study and read and look and view, and to get a better understanding of this significant part of history? Because obviously, I as a filmmaker, I believe that films, narrative TV shows, documentaries, they all can contribute to just such a greater awareness and compelling an audience to learn more about that particular time period or an individual or historical figures. And I think it's important. So, is there something that you can recommend to our audiences?
Unfortunately not. Mr. Sunshine might be the closest, but that's a fantasy. About 10 years ago, there was a lot of movies that came out about the independence movement in Korea. Some of those are pretty good. But if you go on YouTube and you look at these people and they talk about Dosan, the consistency of the history is not there. They get part of the message right, because it hasn't been taught, it's been censored. And like they'll have pictures that they're saying is 1905 and the picture will be 1930, and Tosan's not even anywhere in the ballpark. Ed Chong used a picture in a YouTube thing of me, my grandmother. I'm sitting on her lap. I think I was 1.5. My sister and my cousin says we're a family from Hawaii from 1905, which makes me 130. And a lot of people believe this. So it there really needs to. There's a few things out there that are okay, but most of them are in Korean, and the stuff that the kids do here, it's not their fault. It's what the teachers give them to study. There's a lot of books in English that are old books that are from the 80s and 90s, about the early Korean Americans. But what's happened is most of the people that are teaching Korean studies and Korean American studies are immigrants from South Korea. So they don't have experience with the pioneer generation. They do from interviews and those things, but they didn't live the life. Their families didn't live the life. There's a lot of people who are born here who have a conflict because what they understand as education and what's traditional in education from Korea are two different things. And, talking to a lot of young people in Korea when I was just there, their parents didn't have time. The immigrant parents didn't have time. They're busy making a living. They didn't have time to know the history. Plus, what most of the history today is pro-Japanese stuff. And like right now, they're trying to make uh, relations with Japan um, much quieter than the people that want the truth about the independence movement, the occupation, and those things. There's some guy saying that, that theory that, Japan helped Korea modernize. Well, they did to a certain extent, but Japan also killed Korea's own modernization, which my grandfather started with the Shinminhei. And, like Harvard was pro-Japanese. In 1903, they had a guy, Edward Vernon Morgan, who helped another resident general Japanese guy who was also a graduate from Harvard interject counterfeit nickels so the Bank of Korea collapsed so the Daiichi Bank could take over. So there's
Mm.
just this big void of consistent, comprehensive history. But it's getting better, and so hopefully somebody like you or somebody else that listens to this, I've got the information. I've made some films with other people about other things, but somebody's got to do it. I can't do it. I can help, but I think there's better books than there are media productions. And, the problem with social media and some of the stuff that's been generated by Riverside, UC Riverside, it's believable because of the way they word it, but it's not true.
Mm.
Even Korean American Day. Korean American Day is based on the immigration to Hawaii on January 13th, 1903, when they said that was the exact day that the first Koreans came to America. My parents came in 1900. I mean, grandparents came in 1902. 168 people, including Soje Pil, the first naturalized Korean American citizen, came before that. 168 of them. So it's just uh, mostly business generated and pro-Japanese generated. Like
Mm.
Han Myung-gi used the Tosan Memorial Foundation because his dad was one of the most prolific collaborators with Japan, and he used my grant for 20 years. So hopefully something will be done.
Well, it's important to get the next generation motivated, inspired, educated so that they can take the torch and continue to pass it on and make more awareness and much more media and much more historical narratives to, continue to pass on the history, right? I want to get back to your love of surfing and food because I share the same passions. I haven't been surfing as long as you have, but it's interesting. It's an interesting passion for a historian. I know in 2004 you appeared on Bobby Flay's show to demonstrate how to make Korean barbecue. I'd love to hear more about that. And was it like a way to merge your culinary skills with your cultural heritage on a national platform, or was it really just for a love of Korean barbecue?
Um, it was surfing. It was a fluke. I had a company called United Surfing Association, and we put on surf contests, a lot of them at Malibu. I did it for 15, 20 years. So they had that beach with barbecue, and somebody canceled. And so the producers called me up, found my number in the yellow pages, and they go, "Do you know anybody that cooks? You know, any surfers that cook on the beach?" And I just said, "We all do." I mean, it's like basically beach barbecues have been part of surfing the whole time. So I go, "Yeah, and I do." And she goes, "Well, what can you cook?" "I can cook anything." I bet. She says, "How about something unusual?" I go, "How about Korean kalbi?" And she goes, "Oh, we've never had that." And so I go, "Okay, well, when do you want us to do it?" And she goes, "Well, can you bring 5 or 6 people?" And I go, "When do you want to do it?" "How about tomorrow?" And so um, I just put on a contest, and there was a lot of people still in Malibu hanging out. And um, I called up, and Mary Osborne's the woman on the show, and she was the MTV Surfer Girl. She won the champion. She's really a good surfer. I stay in touch with her. So, we threw it together, and they didn't pay us anything, but they gave us a lot of beer. If you look carefully, you can tell I've been drinking beer by the end. But it was at Rincon, the epic surf spot at Rincon, and it was in the middle of summer when there's usually no waves, but there was enough waves to do that. But yeah, my mom took me to Waikiki and said, "You're going to learn how to surf." I think I was about 12. I went, "Okay," but she left me there for the whole day. And I figured later that she just wanted to get rid of me, but then that was it. I was, smitten with surfing, addicted, so to speak. But the other odd thing is I'm the first person to surf in Korea, not the first Korean. I consider myself an American, and I say that. I go, "Look, I visited there with a friend of mine from Maui. We went to Jeju. We took our boards. I saw it in a film at the Independence Hall, and we went surfing." And so they confiscated our boards at Kimpo because they never saw surfboards before. They'd seen windsurfers, but "Where's your sail?" And I'm going like, "Paro Tagi, we're riding waves. Padme Anya, no wind." And so finally, a friend of my mom's was the Attorney General of Korea, and we called him up, and he straightened it out.
Oh my
But
gosh.
so now I'm there helping a friend of mine who runs 7 restaurants called Hawaii Kim, and she sells one of the most popular things besides poke is spam musubi. So the last trip I was in her kitchen teaching her how to make kalua pork and cabbage, chicken heka, Hawaiian ribs, and oddly enough, broccoli crust pizza. But we're talking about history, too, and you know, um, it's really not the young people's fault, but like you mentioned before, they're hungry, because there's so much information out there, and for some reason, they can sense that it doesn't make sense. Yeah, so, now I'm trying to encourage young people or, filmmakers or anybody really to try to do something more for Tosan.
Wow, that's just yeah, I definitely resonate with that. I mean, this is incredible, and it's just been great to listen to you talk and share about that. So for our listeners, where can we learn more about your work? I mean, is there a website? Is there social media? How can other people get a handle of the information that you have to share and connect with you if they want to?
Um, part of it is Googling my name, Philip Ahn Cuddy, Flip Cuddy. You'll find a variety of things. You know, somehow there's controversial stuff and fun stuff, like with the Ramsayer thing with Harvard. That was pretty popular. And one time I did something on social media, and an influencer in Korea. Um, the first thing, 770,000 people clicked on it. Like I was just in Korea and threw the first pitch out at the Hanwha Eagles baseball game against the LG Twins, and the comments on NBC News were just insane because they were so happy that I represented that part of history for them that they don't see very much. But I have um, three websites. One, my mom's website, SusanAhnCuddy.com. I haven't touched it in a while. I've been so busy, but it's informative. I need to do better on that one. Then I have a new one. It's called DosanSurf.com. And that's more about me, which I really haven't promoted much, but it's the friendlier side of Tosan. Then there's Tosan.org. There's a lot on there. I need to complete stuff, but there's stuff that's up to date. There's controversial things, there's factual things. If you really want to learn the situation with Tosan today, there's that. And that's coming from my perspective and some other people's perspectives. And then if you can find, I think it's KoreanAmericanHeritage.com. It used to be in the kimchi jar. I think I did 350 podcasts, but we used the F-bombs a little bit too much, and so we switched over. But there's some interesting things out there. So for the listeners, bear with me. I have an opinion, but I really am trying to do good things, and the surfing thing in Korea is really getting really advanced. I mean, they have a good national team, and I'm trying to help them with the Olympics and stuff. I worked on a program for surfing the Olympics 20 years ago, but the other guys were kept going. We quit. I gave up kind of the surfing industry and went to Hawaii and worked for the Eddie Aikau Foundation. But there's a lot, maybe we'll do another one of these and get into some other stuff.
Absolutely.
But,
I mean, to your point, I was so amazed. I went to Yangyang, which is, right by Gangneung.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't know there's a surfing culture there. And then also in Jeju, I got a chance to surf down there. It blew me away. And this was back in 2014. And I was like, wow, it's starting to it catching fire over there. So it was really encouraging,
At that time you win is about when it started to catch fire. And in the last 5 years, it's just gone ballistic. I also consult for O'Neill Korea and consult for the Wavepark in Siheung. The Wavepark in Siheung is the best wave park in the world.
I heard
Kelly
about that.
Slater's is a little better, but the overall use, waves, and setup, there's hotels right there. It's a $2 billion resort. It's really brilliant.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Well, someday maybe we'll go, but for now,
yeah,
just want to thank you so much. What a great honor and pleasure to have you on the show, Flip. Just want to thank you, and again, just want to say, just a tremendous amount of work that you're doing to preserve the culture and the history, and so Godspeed to all that. For all you out there, we also would love to hear from you, our valid listeners, about any suggestions and future guests for topics. And don't forget to subscribe to our program on your favorite podcast platform and follow us on Facebook, X, Instagram, and our YouTube channel. Asian Pacific Voices Radio is produced by Asian Culture and Media Alliance, a nonprofit that empowers the Asian Pacific American communities with a voice through media arts. If you would like to support our program, please visit AsianPacificVoicesRadio.com. I'm Arnold Chun. Please join us next week for another exciting and thought-provoking Asian Pacific Voices radio show. Until then, take care, everybody.